Hello and welcome to the first ever Futurewise Plan-A-Palooza. I'm very excited to be here today with lots of folks viewing from around the state. Um, I'm Alex Brennan, the Executive Director here at Futurewise, and I'm going to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into talking about comprehensive plans. Um, Tim, why don't you go first?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tim Trahimovich. I'm the Director of Planning and Law at Futurewise, and welcome to talk about comp plans with us, one of my favorite topics.
Jasmine, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Jasmine Smith. I am the new Director of Local Advocacy at Futurewise, and really excited to talk about some of the work on the East Side and Seattle that we've been doing.
All right, and Brooke.
Hi, everyone. I am Brooke Frickleton. I am Futurewise's Deputy Legal Director, and I'm excited to be here as well.
Great. And Brooke, you're calling in from Spokane, Washington. Very excited to have the Eastern Washington representation today. So what are we talking about? I want to give a little background before we get into the details. We're going to be talking about updates to comprehensive plans and related development regulations. What is a comprehensive plan? It is a plan that a city or county makes that is a legally binding policy document that governs how growth is going to happen in that city or county over the next 20 years, and how that city is planning for housing and housing affordability, for transportation, for its rural areas, for protecting farms and forests and wildlife habitat and water resources, how we're thinking about the collective impacts of our growth patterns on climate change, and how we're building great communities, among many other things. Whereas in other parts of the country, a comprehensive plan is just sort of like an aspirational document. In Washington State, these are plans that are required by state law. They have to follow specific state requirements. And like I mentioned before, they're legally binding on the development regulations and other policies that cities and counties adopt. And at the same time, the plan is sort of like the high-level overarching policies, and then there are also new zoning and development regulations that are supposed to be updated alongside the comprehensive plan. So we're going to be talking about both of those things today. Those requirements are set out in something called the Washington State Growth Management Act, which is this overall framework for how planning and growth is supposed to happen in Washington State. Futurewise was founded with the passage of the Growth Management Act in 1990 to be the steward of those values for how we should be addressing growth in our communities. And we've also been working hard on some updates. Let me back up for a second. One additional piece of context. So these comprehensive plans, they're required to have a major update, what's called a periodic update, every 10 years. And so the reason that we're here today is the first deadline for this new periodic update is 1st of 2024, so within the next 2 weeks. And so many cities and counties are starting to adopt their new comprehensive plans and related regulations under the new set of state requirements that apply to this round. We started working on trying to get those new requirements in place back in 2020 through a campaign called Washington Can't Wait. The idea was that we needed to get these new requirements in place in time to affect this planning cycle. And there were three big components of that. One was an overhaul of the housing element of plans, so new requirements on housing affordability, undoing exclusionary zoning, addressing displacement. The second piece was a new climate change element, which does not actually legally apply to this first cohort of updates. That's going to apply to the ones next year. But a lot of places are still trying to integrate climate change strategies into their plans. And then the third piece of this was the closing of a sprawl loophole that had for many years allowed development to happen in places where it was technically illegal on farmland, in wetlands, places like that. And so this is going to be the first update cycle where that loophole is going to be closed too. We launched those campaigns back in 2020 and were able to pass those bills, first the housing one in 2021, and then the sprawl loophole closure in 22 and the climate bill in 23, with great partners in the state legislature, great legislative leaders, great organizational partners. And then for the last several years now, we have also been building coalitions to partner with at the local level, and also staffing up to have more staff capacity to prepare for this really busy time. And I have to say that even though we've been preparing for this for 4 years now, I have to say I was still not prepared for how hectic things have been just the last couple months as we've gotten close to this first deadline. And I feel like we've been so busy trying to keep up with everything that's going on that we haven't really had a good chance to talk about what those updates, what we've been doing and what's been happening. So with that, that's a lot of talking from me. I think the first kind of, we're going to break these updates into a couple different categories. And so first, I think we're going to talk about the impacts for on our environment, on protecting farmland, forests, wildlife habitat, and water resources, and rural development. And to lead us in that conversation is Tim. Tim, can you kick us off a little bit just to give us a sense of kind of where, what jurisdictions we're talking about, and then maybe start taking us through kind of what are some of the key takeaways?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Alex. Thanks for having me this afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate it. The 2024 deadline, that is the 31st of this year, applies to King, Kitsap, Pierce, and Snohomish counties, and all of the cities within those counties. And so they had that deadline to do it. The counties and cities have been working on this for years. Those of you who know or may not know, the Washington State Legislature was generous in funding updates this year. They provided substantial funding to all of the counties and all of the cities so they could update their comprehensive plans. And that's really important because if you've got money, you can spend staff time doing the hard work that's needed to do this update, doing the studies to determine where the best farmland is, or what's the best strategy for protecting farmland, or how to reduce taxes by focusing growth within existing cities and towns. And so that funding was very important. So thank you to the legislature and the governor for that money. That's really been critical. That enabled all 4 of those counties, King, Kitsap, Pierce, and Snohomish, to update their comprehensive plans this December. They actually got it done before the deadline. They are not going to have to take time away from their New Year's celebrations to vote on their comprehensive plan updates. So we really appreciate the fact that they met those deadlines. Probably the county that overperformed more than any other county is Pierce County. Pierce County has had some challenges in the past planning for agricultural lands, forest lands, and rural areas. Let me talk a little bit about what those categories mean. Agricultural land is land that is used or capable of being used for farming that isn't developed for non-farm uses and that has long-term commercial significance. And that takes into account the productivity of the soils, that takes into account the uses of properties in the vicinity, that takes into account the potential they have to be converted to other kinds of uses. Forest land is similar to that. It is forested areas that also have long-term commercial significance. So they have productive forest-growing soils, and Western Washington is blessed with some of the most productive forest soils in the world. So that's saying something. And it also has long-term commercial significance. It's not near towns. It's not likely to be converted. There's another category, mineral resource lands, which are areas that have good gravel and sand resources and also have long-term commercial significance. The rural area is the area that isn't agricultural land of long-term commercial significance or forest land of long-term commercial significance or mineral resource land. And it's also not land within the urban growth area. So it's land that is used for historic kinds of rural uses. You'll see small-scale agriculture, small-scale forestry, large lot residential development, and some other kinds of traditional rural uses, even golf courses, for example, or airfields. Those kinds of uses can take place in the rural area. And we protect those areas. We protect the agriculture, forest, and mineral resource lands primarily for economic uses, but also for their environmental benefits. Farming is an important part of the Washington state economy. It's an important part of the economy of Western Washington. It also provides us with fresh local food, so it enhances food security. It gives people choices for lifestyles and businesses that they want to operate. If you want to operate a farm, in an agricultural business, you need farmland. And one of the issues in Washington state is it's not easy to get productive farmland anymore. Most of it's in use. There are competing purposes for that. So we set the farmland, the forest land, the mineral resource lands aside for those purposes so that those economic uses can take place. But we also get social benefits and environmental benefits from that as well. Because those aren't being used for, say, low density residential uses, it reduces demands on our county roads, on our state highways, saving taxpayers and ratepayers money. We don't have to extend water and sewer lines into those areas, which would also be expensive. And we get to allow water to infiltrate into the soils and recharge wetlands and rivers and streams and aquifers so that we have water in the summer and the fall. So we've got economic benefits from those lands. We've got environmental benefits from those lands. We have social benefits from those lands. And that's why we conserve them. So how did the counties do on that? Well, the good news is that several of the counties made significant progress on protecting agricultural lands. King County in particular included policies in its comprehensive plan that's going to require development on farmland to have a connection to the farm, that you have to work there or own it or be connected to the farm in that way. And that's important because housing is so expensive in King County that it's actually economically feasible for people to buy 40 acres and build an estate on it and not farm it. But King County has very limited farmland, and so we need to make sure that that land is farmed. As I said before, there's significant market demand for farmland that hasn't been met, and so that's good. So King County made substantial progress on agricultural land. Snohomish County or Pierce County did as well. Historically, Pierce County has given bonuses, increased numbers of houses that you can build on farmland and on rural land, and they eliminated those bonuses. So that's going to make it more feasible to protect that farmland, to also protect rural area. This was actually a really important step by Pierce County to do this. This will both protect farmland and protect the rural and reduce growth in the rural area, which again saves taxpayers and ratepayers money, better protects the environment, reduces greenhouse gas pollution from people driving. So this was a really important step on the part of Pierce County. Another reason why eliminating the bonuses was important is that we have a regional plan for growth and development in Central Puget Sound. It's called Vision 2050. And to make our transportation system affordable, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save taxpayers and ratepayers money, and also to protect the environment, we want to reduce growth in rural areas and outside of urban growth areas and increase growth in cities and towns and urban growth areas. And by eliminating those bonus densities, Pierce County has gone a long ways to achieving the vision of Vision 2050. And so that is very important. Snohomish County also took some steps to protect its farm and its forest lands. They have put together policies in their comprehensive plan that call for studying the land that's designated as agricultural land and forest land and considering whether additional land should be added to those categories. And they're also going to take a look at the policies and regulations that conserve those lands. That's particularly important because Snohomish County has the least protective agricultural regulations of any of King, Pierce, and Snohomish County. And so by committing to taking a look at those policies, they're going to better protect farms, better protect forests. So that is a very positive development. Kitsap County is the county that is lagging. Kitsap County is actually not designated any agricultural land. As part of this update, Futurewise and residents and property owners in Kitsap County asked the county to designate agricultural lands of long-term commercial significance, but they didn't do that. They have their reasons for doing that, of course, but it really would be helpful to protect some of the historic and continuing farms in Kitsap County. So it's unfortunate that they made that choice, but that's the way it goes, I guess.
And just to interrupt and jump in here for emphasis, yeah. Tim. So there is not a single acre in Kitsap County that is designated and protected as farmland of long-term commercial significance.
That's absolutely correct.
There are farms and there are active farms in Kitsap County, and so those places are then not being protected from potentially being converted to other uses.
That's exactly right. They're not protected from incompatible uses nearby, and that land itself can be converted. And unfortunately, over the years, there's been a significant amount of conversion of agricultural land. And one of the interesting things about that is that there's actually been an uptick in Kitsap County's agricultural economy based on the Census of Agriculture. And so we thought this might be a good year to designate it, but apparently not. I also mentioned rural areas, and so let's talk about rural areas for a few minutes. So I still have time, right, Alex?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Doing great.
So there, as I said before, we have this vision for Central Puget Sound, and that vision is more growth in our cities and towns and reduced growth in our rural areas. All four of the counties have been growing faster than the vision in Vision 2050, and so they need to take steps to reduce it.
And when you say growing faster, specifically in the rural areas of those counties, they're growing faster
in rural areas.
The commitments in Vision 2050.
Yep, and it's a share of growth. And so the idea is to reduce the share of growth in those rural areas, agricultural lands and forest lands, but then increase the share in cities and towns. And the good news there is that the Pierce County density bonuses, which, as I talked about before, got rid of the density bonuses on agricultural land, also did that in the rural areas. So that's very helpful. In King County, it's kind of a mixed bag related to the rural area. The good news is that they did eliminate some bonus increases that were made by mistake over the years. And so that's a positive development. They unfortunately didn't go all the way and fully comply with the Growth Management Act's requirements for growth in the rural areas. Snohomish County also, well, they called for growing by the right amount. They didn't really take any concrete steps to do that. And so that's unfortunate. They've been growing significantly faster than the target they have. And so it's unclear how they're going to achieve their rural growth share. Potentially one way of doing it is those policies I talked before about taking another look at agricultural and forest lands. So that potentially will help reach the growth. Kitsap County, to their credit, had many applications to increase densities in rural areas, which would have increased growth within rural Kitsap County. To their credit, they decided not to do that. Unfortunately, they punted that to next year. So how that turns out is important. The county also considered taking some steps that would have also increased growth in the rural area and chose not to do that. So there, the story is a little mixed as well. So again, King, Pierce, Snohomish County made substantial improvements to agricultural land that we really appreciate, and that will go a long way towards achieving the vision that we all share for the Central Puget Sound area as a place that has thriving cities and towns, also still has working farms and working forests. Kitsap definitely needs to do additional work along those areas. And frankly, all of the counties could do a little better on that. But it is great that they made the deadline. It is great that they've made some progress along those lines. And I think I'd be happy to pass it on, or do I still have a little bit more time?
I think let's jump over to Jasmine. We're gonna kind of move on to the cities, but then if we have time at the end, we might bring you back to it.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, welcome, Jasmine. We're gonna be talking more about cities and housing. How about, can you start out giving a little context for kind of the where you're working and kind of how we're doing that work?
Yeah, so the role that I'm stepping into is one that includes both the Eastside Housing Roundtable and the Complete Communities Coalition in Seattle. And the Eastside Housing Roundtable is a broad coalition of employers, nonprofits, business organizations, housing advocates, private and nonprofit developers, and we're all united to support the creation of more affordable housing and diverse housing types at all income levels on the East Side, since it's a shared response to the rapid growth that we've been seeing. And our level of engagement has been really high in Bellevue as an area that we got involved with really early and prioritized that long-range coalition building, and have been involved from the MFT work to our ongoing work in the Wilburton Land Use Code Amendment, which will continue into the new year. Bellevue has taken a bold stance with their adoption. They've really shown Seattle, frankly, how to dream big and answer the call that we have going forward to support housing across the region.
And that's just, Jasmine, just for me to jump in, when you say adoption, you're talking, so Bellevue has adopted their comprehensive plan, and that's what you're talking about.
Yes, the comprehensive plan that was adopted. And at the end of the day, the comprehensive plan can only make an impact if the model of deep engagement and partnership that happened with residents, with stakeholders, including but not limited to the Eastside Housing Roundtable, across the different sectors continues. It's really a moment to transform this ambitious vision into decisive action. And we've been hard at work to ensure that we're able to make the land use code more efficient and find ways to reduce costs and produce better and more affordable housing to realize these goals. Is there anything else that you want to add about the work that's been done in Bellevue thus far, Alex?
Well, one thing a few things. First off, I want to just say we're really excited to have Jasmine on board. You joined us. Gosh, it's been almost 2 months now, right? In this new role, and drinking from the fire hose and getting up to speed in the middle of a lot of big decisions happening, a couple of things on, just on Bellevue, kind of building on some of what you were saying. I think, one thing just, we have the comprehensive plan has been adopted, but as you were saying, like the development regulations, the zoning that is actually going to implement the details of that comprehensive plan, not done yet. None of that has really passed, right? So lots of work still to do next year on that in a whole variety of ways. And then, I think just reflecting back on where the conversation started in 2021, when we really started getting engaged in Bellevue. At the time, Bellevue had a growth target for this upcoming comprehensive plan of 27,000 new homes over 20 years. And when we first started talking to people, they were like, "That's a lot. Like we can't do more than that." But even just in that year, in kind of the final stages of the kind of allocation of growth throughout King County, Bellevue decided that they did want to step up and increase that target to 35,000 homes. And then, in the past, I think they've kind of, in previous cycles, Bellevue has just kind of barely done enough just to say that they could meet the bare minimum that they've been required to do. Whereas I feel like now they're really thinking about, being bold and ambitious, and there's a lot of capacity expected in the plan well beyond that growth target, because they know that we're going to need more capacity, right? Then that not every piece of land that you could build on is actually going to get built on during this time. And so I feel like that's, to me, kind of the biggest change. And then also, I think we're going to talk more about this with some of the other jurisdictions too, but that housing and the need for housing has really been a priority for the city, from the council to the staff, which has been great to see.
Yeah, and I think that theme of there being a lot of capacity that we are preparing for and planning for, and growth targets that we're keeping in mind, is really important across both the East Side and Seattle to keep in mind. Is that, again, not every lot is going to be built on, and that a lot of the conversations that we have need to keep that in mind as we move forward and plan for what we actually will need. And jumping over to Redmond, it's been one of the fastest growing cities that we've been looking at working with, and it's been building the most housing. The comprehensive plan allows them to go even further with significant capacity increases and a strong plan for missing middle housing. It's eliminated parking requirements near light rail. They've streamlined efficiencies on permitting so that we can really get housing online. And it's been in all a top to bottom review to both increase production and prioritize affordable housing. They've also not only fully wrapped up just the comprehensive plan, but as well all the zoning to go along with it, which is another way that they've shown a lot of leadership. And a final point that I want to make sure that I add is that they've not only taken a leadership role in updating the code for permanent supportive housing, but have also prioritized bringing in Plymouth Housing's proposed housing after it wasn't able to build in another jurisdiction, and really actively welcome and shepherd in much needed housing and support. So it's been really great to see the work that Redmond got done before I even walked into this office. Is there anything else you wanted to add about Redmond?
I think in all the jurisdictions that we're going to talk about today, I think Redmond is the only one that has both adopted their comp plan already and all of their zoning updates. Kudos to them.
Exactly. Kirkland as well just got their comprehensive plan passed, but much like Bellevue, in the new year, we'll really get started on that work plan so that we can actually implement the vision, the changes that comp plans plan for, but that we only mean as much as how we allow them to be put into action. Compared to Bellevue, Kirkland is an area where we hadn't had it as high up on the radar and have been watching as they go through the comprehensive plan process. And we're impressed with how strong that it is, but it is also one that we needed to take an active step in these last few weeks to defend the great work that the city, the planners have been doing year over year with active engagement with stakeholders, because it is one that has garnered a lot of attention from community members that have had a different perspective on growth and have really keyed in on some misinformation about the comprehensive plan process as a whole and what some of these changes mean. And so in the hecticness of starting this new role, part of it was getting up to speed and knowing how we can effectively respond to some of the proposed changes that this feedback has brought in. Is there anything else you wanted to add, clarify?
This, I think, all of us who work on these issues know that, change can be scary for folks, right? And if your neighborhood has always been one way, and the idea of having different types of housing, more people, changing the way that the transportation system works in your neighborhood, right? Those are all things that people get nervous about. And so I think it's been an area where we've, if we had more capacity earlier to get more engaged, that would have been great. And I think, it's one of the reasons why it's so important to have the staff capacity, to have folks like you that are, able to get out in front of those things and build relationships and do education in the community. And so in this case, we're playing a little bit of catch up on that. Also want to give a shout out to some of our specific local partners in Kirkland, Livable Kirkland, Eastside Urbanism, Eastside for All, have all been super engaged in that comprehensive planning process too, and it's been great to work with them.
Definitely, their presence, especially at that last meeting, was beneficial, and I know that throughout the process they've been able to continue to show up and show that there's not one voice that speaks for Kirkland, and that we really do want to have broad-based coalitions, livable communities for everyone, and really appreciate the work that they've done. Similarly, in Seattle, we've been invested in the comprehensive plan process through the Complete Communities Coalition, and have been working very hard with the mayor's office and the Office of Planning and Community Development, and have brought forward a really strong comprehensive plan, or draft updated comprehensive plan that's currently in the stage of receiving feedback on the mayor's plan before being transmitted to council. So at the end of this week is the end of the comment period. Similar to how a big flurry had popped up at the end of Kirkland's comprehensive plan process at the stage where council was taking the vote. At this stage where the mayor's office is wrapping up their proposal before they send it to the council, then there's been a flurry of engagement that we've been both monitoring, tracking, and working together with, collaborating with across the city, and wanting to have those educational and informational sessions with folks who are just now plugging in and have that fear and maybe some misunderstandings about what's being planned and what's the difference between capacity and what will happen down the road. And so at this stage, we are tidying up and sending out our comment letter with the coalition to the mayor's office, also city council. We've started meetings communicating with them about some of our priorities, but also really plan on defending the comprehensive plan that the mayor has put forward, and finding ways that the Seattle City Council can improve upon it as well. And really look forward to working with the both select committee and individual council members to ensure that Seattle is also being a leader within the region on their comprehensive plan.
Jasmine, I think you mentioned it at the top, but can you say a little bit more about the Complete Communities Coalition that we're working with in Seattle?
Yes, the Complete Communities Coalition is similarly a broad-based coalition, big tent of advocates that are aligned on that need for more housing in Seattle. And it includes on the steering committee, which is co-chaired by myself and Jesse Simpson from Housing Development Consortium. It has representatives from the Chamber of Seattle, the Tech for Housing. We've had involvement with House Our Neighbors, and we have the Urbanist at the table, Habitat for Humanity. So a lot of really engaged folks from all across the spectrum of the housing needs that we face in Seattle.
Yeah, great. And more to come on all of those jurisdictions. But I think we're going to jump now over to talk with Brooke about some of the other places that we've been monitoring over the. Welcome, Brooke. So maybe you can talk a little bit about kind of your role and how we've been prioritizing some of the cities that you've been reviewing and writing comment letters on.
Yeah, so kind of like Jasmine, I'm newer to the Futurewise staff, especially if you're comparing it to Tim, who hasn't been new to Futurewise for a very long time. So I started with Futurewise in April, and I've also kind of enjoyed the challenge of getting up to speed on a lot of these cities and counties who've been well into the multi-year process of comprehensive planning updates. And so luckily with the added capacity of, myself and Jasmine, we've been able to, where we previously focused more on the county level in a few specific cities, I've been able to direct some efforts towards even more cities to focus on, even a more granular level of looking at comprehensive planning. So I specifically have been focused on both the South King County area, which is where I'm originally from, as well as, and an interesting contrast, some of the higher cost communities in the 2024 jurisdictions that Tim mentioned. So in King County, along with Tim, we've submitted comment letters on Mercer Island, Medina, Hunts Point, and we'll likely also add comments to Clyde Hill and Yarrow Point, and Bainbridge, the city of Bainbridge Island, which is in Kitsap County, is not on track to meet their 2024 deadline. So they are just finishing up their draft environmental impact reviews. So tracking that community as well. And so within those cities, the kind of overarching kind of message and shared characteristic is that these are, historically affluent communities, historically, because of that, exclusive both socioeconomically and in a racial diversity, and so kind of seeing that pattern and trying to really ensure that these jurisdictions are compliant with the law and the updates to the GMA to provide housing to all income brackets, just in the same way that Kent and Federal Way and Auburn are doing that as well.
Rookie mistake. I have my mic off.
Oh, phew! I thought it was just me. Okay.
I think that's one of the things that to me is so important about our state having a coordinated planning framework that everybody has to participate in, is that it does mean that every jurisdiction needs to contribute towards the housing that we need, contribute towards affordability, and that we're addressing the historic patterns of economic and racial segregation, the need for everybody to have access, right, to places near jobs and transit and good schools and all the other amenities that people deserve. So maybe we can take kind of each of those two chunks or typologies of cities, and what are some of the patterns that you're seeing emerge from those plans?
Yeah, there's definitely patterns related to, I mentioned the new requirement that cities do racially disparate impact. And while that may not always come off on its face in a comprehensive plan, a lot of times what that looks like is what a lot of these cities have is almost exclusively single family zones, right? And that, sometimes those areas are as well as maybe even previous racial governance, things like that. So it's important that those cities look at that. So single family zoning is definitely a big one that's common for all of those groups. What's I found kind of interesting in reviewing these comprehensive plans is a lot of them still include like housing policies or land use planning policies that really focus on maintaining a high quality residential setting, or focused on maintaining residential character, or language that on its face is not particularly exclusive, but ultimately what it results in is exclusion to both racially diverse communities as well as low income housing and things like that. And then the other sort of interesting struggle, and this is where it's less, they're not all the same in this sense as much, but generally I think Mercer Islands is a little bit different, but some of those other smaller cities, they have while they are required to provide for and encourage and zone for housing to all income levels, each city is given a target of the of how many units of housing from all income brackets that they plan for that comes from the county level. And a lot of those cities have smaller targets, and I think there's a bit of a opportunity that the cities are trying to see that, I only have to plan for this many, so I don't really need to emphasize that, or I can, the city can do less specific analysis related to those targets, and especially as I think the other common thing is within the new housing requirements is the requirement that all jurisdictions do a land capacity analysis specific to the shelters, temporary housing, emergency housing, permanent transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing. And a lot of cities did not do that in-depth analysis, so that's been a big focus of our letters as well. And having a lot of assumptions around that. So I think in terms of general themes, that's where I put that. And I think, if I was going to kind of dig into some of the more specifics, if that's okay, Alex. So I think
please.
What's unique about Mercer Island that I think is particularly important in our comments to them and potential legal appeal relates to their role as being a place with a new light rail station, right? Alex, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say we have not made any decisions about any legal appeals. I just want to say
I said potential
as a blanket statement, given that this is going out live. Yes, but no, please continue.
Still exploring. Wants to make so potential legal appeals. Relates specifically to Mercer Island's unique geographic location along the new light rail expansion, and so it's essential that Mercer Island adequately plans to create more opportunity for affordable housing that in direct relation to that new high capacity transit, and they more or less failed to do that. The other struggle that we noticed with Mercer Island is that while they did acknowledge the importance of infrastructure and capital facilities, Futurewise has pointed out kind of some concerns related to their capital facilities. So that's things like sewer and things like that, especially as it relates to implementing the new higher density that they are planning for, as well as the new middle housing. That's, the duplexes, triplexes. So that we had some kind of concerns about Mercer Island's kind of the feasibility of their capital facilities and whether it really aligns with what the state requirements are. And then I think so, looking at both Medina and Hunts Point, I think had similar experiences, mostly, as I mentioned earlier, that they had their housing analysis had a specific deficit related to not having enough land for that was zoned for housing that's appropriate to lower income brackets. And so, ensuring that they carry out policies and have strong policies and as well as, changes to their zoning and their development regulations to actually allow that. A common thing that we, put in our letters oftentimes are noticing where, as Tim has mentioned, there's cities or counties that try to do the bare minimum with related to this state requirements. And we like to sort of encourage them to step beyond that. And so, it's looking at housing policies where they say that we're going to consider adding more, capacity for these
things that they actually are required to do.
Yeah, you're not really supposed to consider a speed limit. That's something you're supposed to do and follow. And in the same way that, beyond say having a housing policy language or planning policy language that says we're going to consider making space for affordable housing, we are pushing those communities to create more mandatory language of like committing to that action, right? Or so that they are in compliance with the state law ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so important. And, I think making sure that, one of our responsibilities, right, as the kind of organization that stewards the State Growth Management Act and this planning process is to make sure that we're helping make sure that local jurisdictions know what they're required to do by the state, and pointing them to ways to bring their plans into compliance with those requirements. And planning for those more deeply affordable homes is a really important part of that.
Yeah, and it tends to be these communities, I think with that single family and, they want their neighborhoods to kind of stay the same. And that's ultimately may not be realistic for what the state law requires.
Right. And we know to expect over 1 million new households, right? And so, those, we need to be building homes for those new folks. Thank you, Brooke, for going over those jurisdictions. I think we're gonna bring everybody back for a few closing comments. And I looks like I've got a little eye mask, Plan-A-Palooza eye mask on. So I want to talk a little bit about what's next. We've been talking to you about all of these jurisdictions that either have just completed their comprehensive plans or are about to. We've been doing advocacy, writing comment letters, building coalitions. So what is, I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the new year, and then I'm going to turn it over. I want to just give each of you a chance to share sort of a parting thought, and I think we'll go in the same order. Tim, Jasmine, Brooke, and also feel free to, in your parting comments, fill in anything that I'm forgetting to mention in these sort of closing bits. But so for as we talked about, for some of those jurisdictions, even though they have adopted their comprehensive plan, they have not adopted their zoning or other development regulations yet. And so we're going to be working really closely on that, making sure that that next step goes well and builds on the progress in the comprehensive plans. Some other jurisdictions have not even adopted their comprehensive plan yet, as we mentioned. So then there's more work to do even on that front, especially at the city level. Or I guess all of the counties have now done their plans. So it's really just at the city level where we have a lot of folks that are behind. And then the other piece is, one of the main things that we do is, if a plan and or development regulations are adopted that are not in compliance with state law, then we are often the folks that take legal action to bring them to the Growth Management Hearings Board, which is this quasi-judicial board that reviews appeals of those types of policies. So over the coming months, I think we will also be kind of exploring and evaluating in which cases we feel like we need to do that. And we'll be finding new ways to share that information with you all. Maybe we'll end up doing another one of these live streams, or you'll probably see that information in our monthly newsletter or other updates from us on our mailing list or on social media. And with that, I'll turn it over first to you, Tim, for some closing thoughts.
Sure. Well, again, we really appreciate that the counties were able to meet their comprehensive planning deadlines. That's great. The counties and the cities in those counties are given an extra year to update critical areas regulations. These are regulations that protect fish and wildlife habitats, that protect groundwater aquifers, that protect development from flooding, and that protect development from geological hazards. And so they've got 1 more year to do that. King County, Snohomish County, and Kitsap County are all working on those updates. And those updates are really critical this time. 2 years ago, the Department of Fish and Wildlife evaluated how well we're doing in protecting our fish and wildlife habitats from adverse impacts. And they concluded that we are not meeting the goal of not adversely impacting fish and wildlife habitats. And so we're looking to those critical areas regulations updates to improve the protection for those habitats. That's going to be really important for all 3 of the counties I mentioned. Recently, there's been a proposal in Snohomish County to weaken some of the additional protections that the Planning Commission and staff recommended to include in their critical areas ordinance. They're going to be holding a public hearing in January And we hope you'll participate in that public hearing and let the Snohomish County Council hear in no uncertain terms that yes, we need to protect our salmon, we need to protect our orcas, we need to protect our fish, wildlife, and environment. And so that's something we're going to be working on really hard first part of the year for all three of those counties.
Thanks, Tim. Jasmine, over to you.
Yeah, we'll continue to be actively engaged in the east side with Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland, or not Redmond because they've already gotten their work done, but especially Bellevue and Kirkland as that work continues throughout the new year, and are really excited to have people involved showing up to council meetings and letting their voice be heard. Additionally, in Seattle as well, as council starts to convene around the comprehensive plan and the updates that are now in their hands. I would really love to see people showing up at council chambers, talking about their vision for Seattle, and having you all involved in how we build a bright, beautiful community moving forward. And all in all, the best way to do so is and stay up to date is to sign up for our email list. And I can't wait to continue to advocate with you all.
Yeah, great plug for the mailing list. Just go to futurewise.org and you can sign up right there. Brooke, I'll turn it over to you for final comments.
Yeah, as I was thinking about how to describe all these, common themes between these jurisdictions who are struggling to meet the DMA requirements, specifically by, prioritizing single-family zoning or limiting affordable options like apartments or townhouses in their zoning. Another commonality that is, some of these smaller cities have smaller staff. They may or may not have a full-time planner on that staff. And as we move on to the next kind of 2025 and 2026 jurisdictions, there's also cities that have small staff. And I would never think that I would find any commonality between Medina and the city of Forks, but both probably have small planning staffs. And so, while we do often, our comment letters are a form of feedback, I'm excited to see if we can also, as we are earlier in the process with some of those jurisdictions, like offer our help in a lot of ways and say like we have the capacity to provide advice on these things, and we're Futurewise as a bit of the experts, and so maybe we can help guide them along the way, so that because ultimately the goal here is good land use planning for everybody.
For sure. I think as we have to hold the two things at the same time, right? That one, that yes, all of these jurisdictions need to do the things that they need to do, but also having some empathy for small planning departments and staff that are stretched thin, and council members that maybe feel like they don't have the staff support that they need to understand all the things that they need to do. And that's part of why we're here, to try and fill some of that gap. And I think that's also a great preview, Brooke, for some of the other jurisdictions that we're working in, where more work is going to be coming. We're doing a lot of work on the North Olympic Peninsula right now to get ready for the updates there. So stay tuned for maybe to hear more about planning in Forks in the future. We're doing a lot of work in Everett too, and maybe able to share more about that in the future as well. And thanks so much to everybody who tuned in today. It's great to be able to walk out on comprehensive planning with our community. So with that, have a great Thursday, everybody. And thanks for tuning in.